Hey, what's going on, everyone out there? And welcome to this week's edition of Mindful Money. Right, I'm your host, Prince L, along with my team of financial planners and advisors, along with some good, great people, all right, in attendance in the audience tonight. We've been continuing the conversation on building our financial houses. And of course, you can't build a financial house without having a firm foundation. Now, for those of you that have been paying attention to the content and greatly appreciate you joining us. And, of course, if it's valuable to you, please feel free to hit the like button, share it, comment, subscribe if you're not already. Right. So getting into tonight's conversation. All right, we're continuing the conversation from where we left off in previous weeks. Building the house. Some people, their house may look like this, right? On the left. And for some other people, it may look a little bit more like what they see on the right. Now, of course, what do you want as far as your life goes? Hmm, when do you want to retire, right? And of course, that's some of the things that we discussed last week. Creating a plan or a budget for retirement. Now, I'm going to get briefly into this part of the conversation, but before we even get here, we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to go backwards, and we're going to open up the conversation to anyone that has any questions that may have joined us in previous weeks. I value your time, and to really give the attendees the most value, right, for their time. We're going to have a conversation centered more so around your interests, your questions. So whether it be for you or you're asking for a friend, this is an environment and a space for you to start planning, right? Shouldn't feel any kind of way about it. Some of us got the game plan early in life. Some of us learned it in the middle of life. Some of us are learning it later on. Regardless of where you are, it's never too late to start. So go into the chat, looking for any questions there and no questions there. So if you do have questions, ladies and gentlemen, if you out there do have questions and you want to see it presented in topics on our weekly Mindful Money calls on Wednesday evening Eastern Standard Time at 7 p.m., feel free to email the email address that you see listed below this smiling, handsome face, lflowwellness@gmail.com, right? That being said, who is our first guest caller in tonight?
Hi, I have a question.
Good evening, and
Good
thank you
evening.
for being on.
My pleasure. Always happy to be in this space. I have a question for that I'm going to ask for a friend who has some significant credit card debt, not the worst, but not the best amount, and some back taxes that are owed. And my friend is trying to navigate their financial wellness in a more productive way than they have in the past due to some lessons, some very clear lessons they've learned. And they're wondering about what's the best way to pay some of that money back, how to navigate budgeting around, yeah, paying back
Okay,
so they can reduce their debt.
all right. So how do we reduce the credit card debt and the tax debt at the same time, or is there like a priority or urgency on which one gets paid off first?
There's a little more urgency around the credit card.
Okay.
And at the moment, uh, yeah, there's more urgency around the credit card at the moment. I could elaborate on why.
Would
There's a
you?
lawsuit, there's a pending lawsuit.
Okay.
So because of the lawsuit, there's a need to pay back faster. So what may have just been sitting in a still water pond of debt,
Okay.
it's no longer that because now there's a lawsuit. So now there's more urgency around that debt being paid.
Okay. Well, I guess I gotta go with the elephant in the room first. right? Because it's unfortunate that when it comes to credit card debt, the creditors oftentimes throughout the year can basically close or write off the debt, say that like, they cancel the debt, they can't collect any of the money. What'll happen is they will write it off on their taxes. The taxes reimburse them for their loss, issue them
Yeah.
some type of credits. And then what happens is the previous creditor then turns around and sells the debt to another third party, and they start to engage in a debt collection process or game that, quite frankly, nobody likes to play, right? So, seeing as there's already a lawsuit, there are a couple of options once it gets to that level, which usually revolves around some type of settlement agreement. All right. But if there are lawsuits revolving around credit, right? Um, I'm curious, like, and this is not legal advice and I'm not an attorney, but I gotta have to ask the question. Um, are you in a bankruptcy proceeding for the lawsuit?
I'm not, I don't qualify for one bankruptcy. I forgot the bankruptcy numbers, pardon me.
Would
There's
that be
there are two types of bankruptcy that you could file.
right, 7 and 13?
Yeah, and one or my friend, my friend earns too much
Okay,
for one of them. And for the other one, it didn't seem um, it was more of a, when weighing the pros and cons, it didn't make sense to file
right.
bankruptcy
Okay,
in
so
terms of the impact it would have on on the credit and the amount that would need to be paid back at one
right.
time.
Well, in my experience, sometimes it may not be because of certain amounts, it may not be necessary or like a good idea to go towards the bankruptcy court, but like for just for educational purposes, right? There is something called the adversary proceeding in a bankruptcy hearing where, like, let's say your friend didn't believe that they were the debtor to the debt, right? Like, because oftentimes, you know, it doesn't sound like this is your friend's situation where your friend is the victim of identity theft or identity fraud, but sometimes they get information wrong, and the person who may have a similar spelled name, similar address, may end up with a bill that has nothing to do with them, and it affects their credit just as a result of inaccurate information. So for those out there, it's always a good idea annually to check your credit report. I think it's a good idea to check your credit report quarterly, for those that find credit a priority. Okay. If it's a priority to you, definitely check your credit score 4 times a year. You can make one free request per credit reporting agency annually, right? They give it to you for free, right? But they do allow you to request more than one report per year. All right. There's a certain number, and after you hit that number, they do start to charge you for it. Okay. Now, that said, let's get back to this situation. In regards to the credit card debt, chances are there's a settlement agreement that's being created. Where's your friend at in that part of the process? Is there a settlement agreement? Have they come to terms with the creditor, and has the repayment process or repayment plan already started?
So in part in the crackling in the background, I'm cooking while we're talking. The
Bon
there's still in
appetit.
thank you. There's still in negotiation. There's still in negotiation with the, I guess it's the third party hired by the bank.
Okay.
Or who the bank sold the debt to. Still in negotiation, trying to reduce the amount owed, as well as the number of months that it's possible to pay back the debt.
And here's one of the scenarios in which, like, it's, if you can't file, chapter 7 bankruptcy because you make too much money, right? You're not a farmer, so you can't file chapter 11 unless, your friend is a farmer. I don't know,
No,
possibility.
my friend's not a farmer.
Okay.
No,
Um,
not yet.
okay, all right. But like, if they're not yet a farmer and they make potentially too much money, then they could potentially use chapter 13 bankruptcy, right? It's you just basically saying like it's a voluntary filing. Um, there are some steps before you get to the bankruptcy process that involves around, your friend going to a creditor and debtor educational course because the way the consumer reporting agencies, the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau works is they want to give debtors an opportunity to satisfy all debts by any means and every means possible before it gets to bankruptcy. So like if it creates a financial hardship and there's no way out of it, then bankruptcy would be the place to be at, right? Here's also something that happens in the bankruptcy court is that the bankruptcy court may issue a stay order in any inferior courts. What that basically means is they halt the proceeding in like, a city, a county or a state court where the debt is continuing to grow and accrue in additional fees and late fees and so on and so forth. So while you're waiting there in the civil court for a financial matter, the debt's increasing. At the very least, until the settlement hearing like concludes, it may not be a bad idea to request of your attorneys that they request a stay or like a freeze on the debt because it's still growing. And it's, regardless of how little or how big it may be, no one should have to pay more money on something that they're trying to settle. Okay. So definitely something to talk to to your friends about and make a strong insistence on them asking their attorneys to request that the court stay any, growth in the debt. All right. Not an attorney again, although there are new regulations that are coming out that people don't need to be bar licensed people in order to provide legal assistance. But I'd be careful about that, right? Because same way I wouldn't want anybody going to some unlicensed physician. Same thing for like legal advice. Of course, you shop around, do your interview process. That being said, let's get to the tax part of the question, right? Because this is a pretty good question. A lot of people are dealing with debt. A lot of people are dealing with credit card debt. And then, oftentimes, hey, when it gets to this type of a level, it can end up in a tax lien, all right? For the tax lien, well, are they related? Or are they two different things? Would you know?
Two different things.
Two different things. So when it comes to taxes, all right, and speaking from a position of a former tax advisor, all right, I prepared taxes for many a year for almost a decade. One of the things that I moonlighted doing um, helped me put myself through medical school, along with $150,000 worth of student loan debt, right?
Hmm.
But this is the reason why we learn this information so that way we understand how to handle the things that we take on in life, right? Of course, we'd all make a different plan in hindsight. Doesn't mean that it's an action that we make in regret. Lots of things that we learn from it. We become people that we are today because, right? So when as a in regards to the tax issue, your friend may qualify for a tax waiver, right?
Hmm.
It depends on like the circumstances of your friend, right? Would you happen to know whether or not your friend is dealing with this for the first time, or have there been like multiple other issues that have taken place that, you know, now they're in a little bit of a bind?
Um, this is the first time.
Okay. Now, there are a couple of things you could do with it being first time, what's going to happen though is usually the Internal Revenue Service is going to go through an audit. They're going to crunch some numbers. They're going to cross their I's, dot their T's, all that stuff. But they're doing it for their side of the accounting, right? Because the IRS is really just they're a ledger, they're an accounting service. They do it for the entire country, right? The nation, corporation, whatever you want to call it. There's a number of different things that we can liken it to, okay? But nonetheless, what they're doing is they're going to seek the highest amount of taxes possible. Now, there's a code somewhere in the Internal Revenue Service's rule book that basically says that the taxpayer has the right to lower their taxable liability by basically whatever legal means possible. So while they're doing their number crunching, your friend has to do their number crunching, basically itemize any expenses that they've accrued over the missed tax period, right? Because they'll let you also amend the previous year's taxes. Now, depending on certain things, I'm kind of curious. Did your friend own or operate a business that they were generating an additional income from, and basically the IRS is penalizing your friend based on maybe not necessarily the unreported income, but the unitemized income that may have had business expenses but never got written off?
Yes,
Okay.
that is
So
the case. There is a business.
okay. So and the interesting thing about this too is that like going
Two
going
businesses, excuse
if
me.
they're okay, so what you can essentially do is you could itemize the expenses for the two businesses appropriately, right? Like, of course, you're going to need to do a little bookkeeping, maybe need to use QuickBooks, which, may help you do some bookkeeping in a very simple and easy way. It's just an application. You connect it to your bank accounts. You swipe left for personal, you swipe right for business, income, expenses, whatever. It'll give you a generated report. Very, very good tool and application. There are other apps out there too that do something similar. Of course, the ones that do provide you the best service, you got to pay for. Okay, so hey, we all got to pay to play the game. Okay, so what you could do is you could amend your previous year's taxes, itemize any expenses appropriately to the different businesses. And what that may do is reduce your taxable liability by reducing how much actual profit did not go towards a business operational expense. Are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay.
That sounds
So
cool.
and then, of course, you'll probably want to consider talking to the tax court like advisory service, because they have one of those, depending on how much is owed and back taxes. They sometimes and usually they do provide a free service telling you like, hey, this is what your taxpayers' rights are, this is what you can do, this is what you can request. And one of the things that they say that you can request, if you look at the Bill of Rights, and I know who would have thought there was a taxpayer's Bill of Rights, but if you request a taxpayer's Bill of Rights, one of the last rights the taxpayer has is to request a waiver for any penalties. So not only do you do your due diligence by doing your accounting, doing your bookkeeping, amending your previous year's taxes, writing off any and all appropriate, expenses, to which I may also add, you don't have to have an EIN number for that business up until the year in which you file for, right? So maybe the business may not have been incorporated in the past. However, if they go backwards and it's like, well, we should have incorporated the business, but we didn't, And if you incorporate the business and then you just put on a date that it started at this date, which you can backdate, right? But that it becomes effective on a different date and more closer to the present, you can totally do that. You can then update and adjust your reporting. And then after you've done all the necessary accounting and you've gotten as many of the deductions as you possibly can, then you request a waiver, right? Get the debt as low as possible, right? If because the IRS is gonna fight you, they're gonna be like, no, you owe us this much money. You're gonna go, no, I wasn't ready. No. And no one wants to be in that position. Because they are gonna be like, no, you owe us this much. And it's your right to say, no, I challenge that. I say that it's not. Here's my accounting. And as a matter of fact, I'm willing to pay this much if you agree to settle. And oh, by the way, because it's a first time thing, I'll never do it again, but can you please like waive this for me? Right. So I had a client not too long ago, actually, she was $30,000 in back taxes owed, right? Which to some people that's a lot, to some people that's a little, okay? 30,000. I have her working with one of my tax advisors. Tax advisor basically cut the tax debt in half to about 15,000. Now my client only has to pay back 15,000. Why did I do this? Because my client could not figure out where to get money from to invest into her future. And I gave her a challenge. I said, if I can find you the money, will you get income protection and start investing into your future? If I can find you the money. She's like, you can find it, I'll do it. Cool. Owe anything in back taxes? First question I asked, owe anything in back taxes? You expect a tax refund? I do owe back taxes. No, I don't expect a tax refund. Okay. If I can find you the money in the taxes that you owe, will you put the money that I save you into your income protection and your retirement? Yeah, I'll do that. But you got to find it first. Last week, I get a phone call, my tax advisor, they did their thing. Hey, that's what we do. That's what we do here. We working. Okay. Got almost $15,000 cut, like I mentioned before, off the tax debt, right? And they're getting ready to enter the settlement agreement with the request for the waiver. So it's already as low as 15,000. We've already eliminated 50%. If we can get it lower than that, or if we can get it waived, guess where they're going to be spending the potential $235 that would have been going to a monthly payment for back owed taxes. We're going to be putting that into their future. All right. So for your friend, of course, you're going to be providing them information third party. I'd like to invite you to extend an invitation to them. Hey, send your question over to this email address, lflowwellness@gmail.com, and let him know that you talked about it, but you need to give the rest of the details. I can only go so far with that, if that makes sense. I hope that helped, caller.
Yes, thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Thank you. Did I miss any parts of in that explanation, or did you have any questions maybe about that?
There was one question I had about repayment, if it makes more sense to follow the repayment plan or try to pay off the debt in larger chunks to speed up the process.
So is there sometimes when it comes to either the tax or the credit, there may be an interest that's placed on it. Is there an interest that's paid on either the credit repayment or the tax repayment?
I'm not sure. No,
Okay.
I don't think for the credit.
Okay.
There's no interest.
So like if your friend misses a payment, will they suffer any fees
Oh.
as a result of it?
Yes, pardon. Yes, if they miss a payment, they will suffer.
What, what's the punishment if they, or the penalty rather, if they miss a payment?
Um, I actually have to inquire. I have something in mind, but I think it's not correct, so I'm not gonna say.
What do you think could be applicable to your friend?
In that situation?
Yeah.
I guess it would be interest. I think there's a larger penalty than interest, though, for not repaying after the settlement occurs.
All right, here's my
I think
suggestion.
it may restart the clock. I'm not sure, though.
Okay, here's what my suggestion would be. For both the credit and the tax debt, right? But mostly specifically for the credit debt, right? On the credit card debt, there's more than likely going to be an interest that's applied to it. I would strongly encourage you to encourage your friend, find out what the interest rate will be, and then calculate using the rule of 72 how long you have, or they have rather, to repay the debt before it doubles in the benefit and interest of the creditor. All right. Are you familiar with the rule of 72 by chance?
I am from these calls,
Okay. Well, what do you remember about the rule of 72?
but a refresher would be helpful.
Okay. So a refresher. Rule of 72, we divide 72 by the interest rate, and that gives us the approximate number of years it takes for a debt in this particular case double, right? If it was an investment, we would use the same rule of 72 to calculate how long it would take the investment to double after 1 year's, contributions, right? So let's say, for example, the interest on the debt was 12%. Well, we would divide 72 by the whole number of 12. That would give us 6. And that means basically your friend would have 6 years to repay the debt before it doubles. Now, if that's a possibility, I would definitely go with it. I would say pay the absolute most based on that rule of 72, whatever once you calculate how many years it's going to take, then take the whole amount. And with the example that I gave before, let's say it's $10,000 or let's say it's $6,000, right? And you have 6 years to pay it off, right? You got $1,000 to pay it off every year. Divide 1,000 by 12, you get that number. That's your minimum payment for the month and for the next 6 years. Not you, but for your friend, for the friend that you're asking for. And it doesn't just apply with a small amount like $6,000. You could do that with anything. Of course, the larger the percentage, and of course, the larger the debt, it may not be a possibility. But there are other things one could do. However, it gets kind of risky and it takes you down another spiraling rabbit hole. Case in point, you could consider going to a loan provider, request a loan in the amount of whatever your total debts may be. Basically, this is another form of loan consolidation, right? Or debt consolidation, rather. You get one loan with one interest rate to take on the paying off all the debts that you may have, and then take that loan, go pay it off, and then start working on paying off that one loan that you have with the one interest rate. Basing it still on the rule of 72, pay it off within that time frame, no questions asked. Of course, for some people, this may make it a very difficult situation because now you got to decide between beans and rice for however long you got to pay that debt off if you're going to max out the payment, or if you're going to say, well, I'm okay with going a few years over and just paying a little bit extra in interest. But if you don't, stick around and we can definitely, that's something that maybe we can have a conversation. Is that, would that be all right?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, and rather, I know that the conversation is not with you, it's with your friend, but perhaps you being present to have the conversation with your friend and myself would help them feel a little bit more at ease about discussing this. Now, of course, you're not trying to violate their privacy, but you're concerned, and it's a healthy level of concern. Uh, Worst thing you would want is for your friend to end up in a bad relationship because they need help and creates a corner that nobody ever thinks possibly exists, right? But these
Right.
things happen. Uh, I'm gonna spare everybody my Cinderella story. I think you guys have heard it too many times, right? But and I'm gonna spare you guys the three little pig story. Although we all know which little piggy we want to be. We want to be the one in the stone house, right? Not the one of straw, not the one of sticks, right? Um, but excellent question. Let me go ahead and we're gonna have a conversation after this call, and let's see if we can create some solutions for your friend. All right.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all this.
Absolutely. For everyone else, I tend to go a little bit deeper, but because we have such, um, our attendance is as it needs to be tonight, right? We have this is a fireside chat on finance this evening, right, ladies and gentlemen? So if you have questions for those of you who are watching later on, on the YouTube, and what am I saying? I say that often. You don't know. You don't know. But I want you to know, and clearly maybe somebody else wants you to know too. But the worst thing you could do is share this information. Oh my goodness, don't do that. The last thing you could do is share this video with someone else that might be in a similar position as you, who use that lifeline, right? Who could use that lifesaver, man in a boat, man in a helicopter, whatever. Okay. So let me go to the chat. Let's see. Do we have any other questions in the chat? That was a good conversation. So I don't, if anyone else agrees, definitely put a 5 in the chat real quick if you're still alive. 5 if you're alive. I thought that was a good conversation that we just had. We just helped somebody create some solutions. All right. Not to mention, I think we might have helped somebody find some money, by not letting it go to Mr. Samuel. Okay. Got a bunch of 5s in the chat. By not letting it go to Mr. Samuel, what are we helping you do? We're making sure that your money goes to the people you want it to and not to the people that you don't. Okay, but gotta start somewhere. So let me see, what else did I have? I did have a little something here. Here's the actual presentation for the evening. Unless we have some additional questions, I think we might have some questions about this little formula that I put together. And if it helps you, feel free to snap a screenshot of this. Take it with you, study it. Uh, you know, a friend, me and a very close loved one of mine, we have this expression where they say knowledge is power, and then I say, but only when applied. Okay, so I don't know what you're gonna do with this information, but the intention behind it is that you apply it. Don't just learn it for the sake of having these tips and these tricks, but you're not applying it to your own life, right? That's foolhardy and it's foolish, right? But a wise man learns from the experience of others, and a fool, well, they only trust their own experience. So let's talk about this formula, right, guys? Now, when it comes to wealth, nobody likes talking about it, but we have to talk about life expectancy. all right, age and gender. Now, the average lifespan for a man is age 84. For women, it tends to be 86 to 88. So there's a 2 to 4 year gap. Now I know some of us may be saying, "Oh, I'm holistic, I'm vegan, I eat healthy, I'm vegetarian, I only eat grass-fed corn, I only eat, cow-fed beef." Okay, well, that would be wrong. Cow-fed beef. Who wants to do that? That's a cannibalistic cow. That's how you get mad cow disease, right? It really is too. The cow starts eating it. Sorry, wrong conversation. But I digress. Okay. We've got a certain lifespan. Okay. And for the most part, the average living person in the United States of America will see 84 to 86 or 88 for women, all right, on a in a good day, right? Now, retirement, here's where we got where what does my life expectancy have to do with my income? Well, retirement for most people is an age of 65 or 67. At least it was. Okay. Now people are working past the age of 70, age 74, to still generate additional income to take care of expenses that maybe not a good enough budget. Now, the budget may be coming from a number of other things, other factors to consider. People being married, a person, couples actually do better in life expectancy and in income. But one of the biggest contributors to divorce is finance. So let's think about that for a second. People do better financially and in life emotionally when they're coupled, right? But the number one thing that causes the break is the financial support. Okay. Nobody wants to deal with that. So you have to think about spouse, right? Whether or not you're creating a family, bringing in children, okay? And so these things are at the core foundation of any valuable or worthwhile financial plan. If you don't take any into consideration these four things: age, gender, married or single, is it you or are you supporting other people? Right? Because we've got to be respectful and considerate to someone's budget. So the income, I believe that what most people want to do is they want to pay themselves first, but they don't know how. Right? So you got to start out with the lesson that you learned in Sunday school. You give 10% of your personal income, right? You're going to keep 10%. That's it. That's what's in your checking account, 10%. In your savings account, you may want to split this up, okay? 5% goes towards a high interest savings account. The other 5 or 6%, because I don't know what other people are doing, they may have a traditional 9 to 5 job. If you've got a traditional 9 to 5 job, then you may want to consider maxing out your employer contribution if you're entitled to a 401k plan. And for some, they go up to 6%. So 5 or 6%, max it out, right? But then that takes you to about 10 to 11% that goes towards your savings. 5% goes towards a high interest. So you can keep that 5% to yourself in a high interest savings account. I don't know where you might want to go. HSBC, I hear, is pretty good. Okay. I like some other entities, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm, biased towards anyone or any, one financial institution. All right. I don't have a dog in the race. So if you find a good high interest savings account, put you 5 or 6% into that, 5% into the high interest savings account and put 5 or 6% into your retirement benefits that you get from your employer. It's a tax write-off, all right, depending on what you're doing. Okay, it's a tax write-off if you've got a Roth IRA, by the way. Why? Because a Roth is taxed now. A traditional 401k or a traditional IRA is taxed at withdrawal. So bear in mind, at that time, you're going to be older, which means you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. So you're paying less in taxes, put money aside for tomorrow, but they still love that you do, and they allow you to at least write it off as a deduction on your taxes. So there's some incentives right there from the government to put money into your retirement. Okay, they like to see you do that. And then take 9%, the remaining 9% or 10%, and put it towards miscellaneous things, like generating an income of emergency savings of 3 to 6%. After you do that, mind you, you still got 10% that goes towards your personal needs, right? Every month, just because you have these percentages allocated doesn't mean you have to exhaust them when the money comes in your pocket, right? We still have 70% of income left over. Why is that? Well, just like with your credit, you never want to go over 30% of your total credit utilization. Well, I don't want you to go over 70% of your total income towards expenses and debts. So that's what that other 70% is there for. 70% is to go towards your expenses and your debts. And I don't think anybody wants to have 70% of their income going towards expenses and debts. But we got lifestyles. Some people got, caviar dreams and champagne wishes. Me, I'm okay with a cup of coffee or, a mug of tea and some herbs on the side of that too. So, and so of course some good food and a nice place to sit down and enjoy the scenery, you know, rest my head on my chin, look stoic. But that's that's my retirement, all right? Expenses and debts. 70% of your income should not be going to, it should not go over 70% of your income towards expenses and debts. Listen, last week we talked about a base salary. If you're making $45,000, $50,000 at the base just to ride the clock, not including your overtime, you live within that $45,000 to $50,000 range. If you start your savings plan living with people, you don't feasibly have a realistic savings plan until you're able to do it for just yourself on your own. So you have to plan those steps. This isn't like, oh, just like with the game of Monopoly, you don't just go to go. You don't. You got to go through. You got to go through each. You got to go through the utilities company. You got to try to avoid jail, right? You got to try to reduce as much taxable liability as possible. I mean, and then hopefully with what you got when you started the game, you're able to buy up some stuff, some income producing assets, right? So then that's where we talk about investing, okay? But remember, some people will only do this 5 or 6% as their investment, okay? If you are at a job where you get paid additional money for overtime, time and a half, that's your additional income to take all that, save it up, invest it one time at the end of the year. You can keep a portion of it if you like, but 70% of it needs to go to your investment. Whatever your overtime is, you should definitely be putting that into investment, right? This is an easy way to help people become have 6 figures in the bank by doing things like this for 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years. Okay. And the younger we start with showing and teaching people these kinds of concepts, the faster and the longer they stay out of debt. Right? The faster they're able to pass on, not just this experience, not just this knowledge, but also something of greater value that doesn't revolve around like go to school, get a good job, maybe get married, maybe retire, and have something to just enjoy at the end of the day, right? So, common objections, real quick here. At the end, most people are like, there's no money, whether they believe that as a philosophy or as an economic principle, you know, regardless of how long of a term they are working for, at the end, most people are concerned that there is no money, right? They end up going back to work, right? People may try to stay retired for a year, then they don't know what to do with their minds, their mental health begins to decline, they end up going back to work, right? Some people, work keeps them young, it keeps them alive, right? But you should not have to work for money. I repeat, you should not have to work for money. So when you reach a certain financial independence number, okay, and we can help each person that is attending and watching this, if you want to find out what your own financial independence number is, me and my team, we're happy to show you how to achieve your financial independence number. We have something called the premium recovery strategy. We've been waiting to talk about this for a couple of weeks now, but I'm I'm excited about this. Clearly, I'm excited to talk about this strategy. Nobody else is talking about this. Nobody else is talking. And if you want to know more about it, you're gonna have to come back next week to find out. All right. Grass-fed corn. That's right. That's right. I see it in the chat. Grass-fed corn. Grass-fed corn. See, somebody got it. Somebody got it.
So
But
you're telling us for some grass-fed corn.
That's right. That's right. Organic, no pesticides.
It's on the menu for next week.
That's right. That's right.
The recovery strategy.
Recovery strategy. There we go. We're gonna plant some corn and we're gonna make sure that the sheriff don't come to eat it all up. It's Bob Marley reference. Every time I plant the corn, they come and messed up, right? But we can avoid someone else coming to chop down our corn if we plant it out. Okay, these cornfields are gonna grow for years and years and years. That said, got some other tips as well. Go to school, get a good job. Hey, this is what we covered last week. So there's your review right there. But if you want to hear what we talked about in last week's conversation, definitely go back and check out the archives, check out the YouTube feed, and Mindful Money. We're showing you how to mindfully manage your money holistically, right? With your host, Dr. Prince L. We appreciate you all for being here this evening, and thank you.